We're going over System Pticha, Preface to the Wisdom of Kabbalah, by Bala Sulam, Chapter 1, the Thought of Creation and the 4 Phases of Direct Light. Session number 8, the Host and the Guest, Allegory of the Screen. Bread of Shame.
Bread of Shame by Baal HaSalam. Number 15. Thus, new Kelim vessels were made in the Partzufim phases of Kedusha, holiness, instead of Bahina Dalit, phase 4, after Zumzum Eleh, first restriction. They were made of the Or Hozer, reflected light of the Zivuk, the Hakah, coupling of striking, and the Masak, screen. Indeed, we should understand this Or Hozer, reflected light, and how it becomes a vessel of reception, since initially it was but a rejected light. Thus, it is now serving in an opposite role from its own essence. I shall explain that with an allegory from life. Man's nature is to cherish and favor the quality of the soul and to despise and loathe reception from one's friends. Hence, when one comes to one's friend and he, the host, invites him for a meal, he, the guest, will decline, even if he is very hungry, since in his eyes it is humiliating to receive a gift from his friend. Explanation of item 15. Thus, new states of perception are revealed after the barrier, where we sense ourselves as the cause of reality instead of the consequence. This is caused by reflection on reality that we are manifesting our experiences. This is expressed through the concept of the coupling of striking in the screen. Indeed, we should understand the reflected light from the screen and how it became our new perception after the barrier, since initially it was but a rejection of reality. Thus, it is now serving in an opposite role from its original behavior. I shall explain that with an experience from life. Our nature is to cherish and favor choice and to despise and loathe restrictions. Hence, when we arrive to a myriad of opportunities, we will avoid making a decision even if we really need to make a choice, since we feel limited by our resolution.
Cause and consequence. Explanation. Item 15. Thus, new states of perception are revealed after the barrier, where we sense ourselves as the cause of reality instead of the consequence. So the idea is that when we're born into reality, we're basically born into phase 1, where we're unformed, and we start in the situation where we think we're the consequence, that everything that's happening around us, we're responding to it. That is, we're not actually responsible or controlling anything that's actually happening to us. We're just having to respond, to be reactive to different situations. And these 4 phases, which are specified here, are to show how on each degree we try and grow. So the idea is every time we enter a phase 1, an unformed state, that's when we have lack of worth in self, which means we feel, life is just happening to us, it's not our fault, we're just a consequence of life. Then, if we advance and we start to have worth of self, then we want to do something about it. And then we reach phase 2, which is called chaos. This is where we have the lack of worth in the method. That is, we don't have faith, or we don't believe that the method will help us actually advance. So that's lack of worth in the method. We already have worth of self, but we don't have worth of the method. And then if we are able to advance, then we reach phase 3, which is darkness. We know that the method we have worth of the method, we have worth in self, but it's not working for us. And then we blame either ourselves or somebody else. So it's either my fault or somebody else's fault, and that's called darkness. And then we have to shift our focus from it's my fault or somebody else's fault to having faith in our future state, and that's phase 4, the spirit. And the idea is where our focus is not on the vessel of my current situation is terrible, rather you focus on the future, that it's going to be better. And you can just see in the phases how you go from consequence to the causality, where I'm actually going to make it. I'm going to change my life to be better. I've got worth in myself, I'm worthwhile. I've got worth in the method. I know that it's nobody's fault, and I know that by using the method correctly, I'll advance and reach my future state.
So when I'm looking at it, it took me a few minutes to sort of like understand the meaning of worth in self, worth in method. And I translated in myself to a sense of self, first of all, and then a sense of the system, of the environment. Is that something that rings a bell?
What do you mean?
Well, the first thing that one can perceive, or perceives, not can, just perceives, is himself. And he's totally focused on himself in phase one. And he's focused on himself in the sense that he's actually getting to know that he actually exists, that he is who he is, that he's got worth, he's got some value, he is something. And when this part of the perception is sort of like mature to a certain extent, or to its full extent, I don't know, then he starts thinking about the environment. Where is he? You know, the system itself, the light in which he resides. And when he fully comprehends that, then he understands that there's him and there's a system. And he also understands that the system, you know, is aimed at giving him only good, but he definitely does not feel it. So the natural feeling is to start looking for reasons as to why I'm not perceiving the system as I know I should be perceiving it. Why am I feeling all these pains? And then when you're looking for somebody to blame, surely you'll find him. It can either be you or the light, you or the other person. And then you realize that you're being foolish because there's no other person, there's only you and the light. And then you get elevated and you have faith in your future state, and then you move on. This way, the way I just described it, is something I can relate to.
I agree with what you said. And you can see how at the beginning you're focusing on yourself, then you're focusing on something outside of you, the method, then you continue focusing on people outside of you, and then you have to return to yourself. So you can see this sort of breathing in, breathing out sort of motion.
Why are you saying that phase 3 is going back? Is yet a continuation of looking at other people?
Because you're still dealing, even when you say it's your fault, you're still talking about sort of what you're doing in your externality. Yeah. And the idea is that when you reach phase 4, that's already your internality. You're sort of not focusing on it's, you know, it's something I'm not doing right, or something else is not doing right, which is both in reality and externality. You go back to having faith in your future state, which of course is internal.
Yeah, I can also say that even when I'm saying that it's my fault, the my who owns the fault is not really me. It's my body, it's me as I perceive myself in reality. Okay. Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Zakai, and faith in the future state means that you already know your place in the system. Everybody also in the them place in the system. You know that.
Well, it's dealing with you, right? You know where you are, and you know what your next phase is, and you're aligned to that next phase. So you know that you're going to get there. And when you reach that end of that phase 4, you feel very elevated. You're like, any moment now, I'm going to be in my next phase.
You know, I had okay, I'll say I had a discernment today that it went like that. That the very basic discernment is the following two exact opposite: knowledge and feeling. And when I'm taking that and I'm putting it in on these 4 boxes, then what I see is as follows. Feeling yourself, phase 1. Knowing, you say I moved from feeling to knowledge. Knowing the system, okay? When you have these two, okay, you have attained something, because in order to attain, you need both the feeling and the knowledge, and only then you can shift your focus upwards, only because you have these 2 levels beneath you.
So you could say that unformed is when you don't feel anything. You're unformed to what you feel. Then in chaos, you feel chaotic, right? You're sort of emotional. And then in darkness, you're more in your mind. And then in spirit, you combine the 2 together, the emotion and the mind.
So could we say when we enter each new phase, like I was in phase 1 after the barrier, I would go through like 3 descents until I get to the 1 ascent?
No, so
and then after the ascent, I go back down to the unformed.
So they're not 3 descents. It's more like it intertwines. So basically you've got, like you could say, it feels like a descent because you've entered a new phase, right? Then you have a descent.
I'm not happy anymore. I don't have the faith of the future state.
Because you're already there.
Because then I just got there. So that's over. So I'm there. So what's it again? Emotionally like flat?
Yeah, it's like, this is new. I've never been here before. What am I meant to do? I'm unformed about the situation. And then you reach chaos. The movement from unformed to chaos is actually good, right? You feel elevated. You feel like an ascent. Then from chaos to darkness, it feels like a descent.
But chaos, I'm going to have doubts about the worth of the method.
Yeah, but the movement, you could say that the movement from the lack of worth in self to chaos is where you actually feel worth of self.
Okay.
Right? And then when you move from lack of worth in method to my fault, somebody else's fault, that is felt as a descent. So moving from phase 2 to phase 3 is always felt as a descent. You're also like crossing between the heightened state of the previous state and moving into the posterior of the new state. Right? We always say that chaos is when you own that state.
Right.
And then darkness is when you're moving into your future state and you're like, I'm feeling the opposite of it, right? And so moving from chaos to darkness is felt as a descent. And then moving from darkness to spirit, of course, is felt as an ascent. Okay.
When I'm thinking about it, I feel it a little different than what you described earlier, Zachary, because you said that it's phase 1, it's unformed, so you don't feel anything. But you do feel. What you feel is unformed. And it's all kinds of emotions of feeling like, just as if we described, like, I don't know where I am.
Exactly.
I'm feeling lost.
Right, so you don't have an emotion about your state. Your emotion is like, I don't know where I am in my state. While in chaos, there is emotion there, but it's more about your state itself.
But when I'm where Jeffrey is, I can say I don't know where I am. And I can say that I feel lost. So I'm in the feeling, not yet in the knowing. The knowing will come in phase 2. In phase 2, I will begin to know where I am. That's what I feel.
You could say that in every degree, you've always got that emotion, and then the next phase gives you knowledge for your previous emotion.
Right, exactly.
And then you're given a new emotion, and then the next phase will give you knowledge on that emotion. And
yes. They intertwine, meaning like, yes. Absolutely. Meaning like, yeah, I totally get what you're saying. But it starts, for me at least, it starts for me when I enter a new stage, just as Jeffrey just did. I know that the first stage is an emotional one.
Yes.
I basically feel all kind of things, and I'm recording and registering and sensing and trying to feel like, where the hell am I? I'm lost. I don't know where I am. Yes, I don't know, because then at a certain point, the level of discernment which I've acquired this far is enough for me to start understanding the situation where I'm at. And then I'm already at stage 2 where, okay, now I can see where I am. And at that moment, okay, the place where you are is not the place where you were, because anyway, I can keep on talking forever. You guys should shut me up.
It's totally fine. Reflection on reality. Explanation. This is caused by reflection on reality that we are manifesting our experiences. This is expressed through the concept of the coupling of striking and screen. So we talked about this in the previous session, and we can go over it again. So we've got, this is talking about, we've got the Partsuf, the spiritual face, and the idea is you've got Or Yashar, direct light, which is basically reality, that would normally come into the vessel, which is Bechina Daled, phase 4, Ratzon, desire. And you feel as the consequence, like if I'm receiving reality, that means I'm a consequence because I'm responding to what reality is showing me. And the whole idea of the screen is to say, no, I'm not responding to reality. I created reality. So I'm not actually responding to reality, I'm responding to myself. And that's what the screen allows you to sort of reject at sort of the initial light of direct light and say, I'm only going to receive a certain amount of that light, a certain amount of that reality, and take causality over that part. And the part that I don't take causality over is called Or Makif, the surrounding light. And I'm going to just sort of put that on the side. I'm not going to deal with the causality about that. But the part that I am going to receive, I'm going to take causality on it. I'm going to say, I'm the cause of that experience. I made it happen. I might not know why, but I know that I manifested it. So I'm not actually reacting to reality. I'm reacting to myself. And that whole movement from going from cause, from being the consequence of reality to the cause, that's what the screen gives you. It gives you that sense of power. It gives you that sense of responsibility, that ownership, that I'm creating my events in reality. And therefore, if I need to do any correction, it's mostly going to be inside of me. And this sort of clothing of saying, I'm the cause of it, this is the reflected light that in the head, in the Rosh, is the calculation. And then afterwards, when it goes inside the spiritual face, into the desire, it's clothed with that screen saying, everything that I'm receiving, I actually manifested.
So I have a question on this. When are you having equivalence of form? In the consequence or at the cause?
The equivalence of form is the cause. If we say the creator is the cause and we're the consequence, so by me getting my screen, I have equivalence with that causality. I'm saying the creator is the cause and I'm the creator as well. Therefore, I'm also the cause.
All right.
I got to tell you. Go ahead.
Exactly, and the light that this screen is reflecting is the light we already attracted this light already, right?
The reflected light is the screen vibrating, clothing the direct light, clothing reality. So this is from the screen. It's not so the direct light being reflected. Rather, it's the screen being reflected. It's the screen which represents this idea of that I'm the cause, not the consequence, that clothes reality, that sort of says the reality that's now going to come into my perception, I made that happen. So clothing it, you're saying, it looks like I'm receiving, but actually I made it happen.
And the key in this happening, this occurring, is to work with it and work with it internally and watch it evolve as you work with it, not necessarily shut it off.
What do you mean?
Well, so this comes to us and this light comes to us through our environment, the way that we're interacting with our movie per se. And a situation comes. It's this, you've just recognized that, okay, I'm causing this new situation that's before me. I can handle this part of it, but not this part of it. And I'm not, the goal is to work with it, to work with what part of it you can work with inside of you, and not just push the entire situation away and walk away from it. I mean, I know we have the capacity to do that almost everything, but sometimes we don't. So that's the goal. We've received this to work with.
Exactly.
Not to just completely remove or block all of it and walk away from it.
So you could say the restriction is when you're sort of just saying, you're blocking it all. You're saying, I don't want to deal with this right now. That's like a restriction. And then when you're actually sort of activating the screen, that's when you're saying, okay, I'm going to calculate how much sort of can I handle? And the amount that I can handle, I'll handle. And the amount that I can't handle, I'll put it to the side. I won't deal with it right now.
Okay, great.
I have to say that the following went through my mind, okay? The light is discernment. That's all there's out there. So before the barrier, I get the light, I get discernment. For example, I see somebody in front of me talking at me. Fine. So I got a set of discernments. The discernments including the fact that it's human, it's standing on its feet, it's got hands, all kinds of discernments that create the body of the person that I'm perceiving. And then it attributes all kinds of emotions to that person because I have some kind of emotion towards it. And then there's one little discernment, okay, which has two opposite sides to it. One is me, and the other one is not me. Okay? Now, the information we're always getting before the barrier with this attribute, with this switched on to the not me. So when we perceive it, we see a person, and our perception includes this discernment which says, it's outside of me, it's not me. I end here, and that person is out there. And then, when we get the screen allows us to do one little thing, is to switch that switch to the other side, to me. Okay? We get the information, it falls on the screen, we move that switch, we throw it back into the light, and then it falls back. But this time when it falls back into us, it falls back with a different discernment. I'm seeing the person, and I know it's me. This is me I'm looking at.
It's a manifestation of me.
Yes.
Yes.
Zakai, I have a question in regards to the previous slide, that one. In regards to where it says lack of worth in self, lack of worth and so forth, I'm getting the sense that that third line is the description of like, it's an evolving step. You go from phase 1, 2, 3, and 4. But that particular description is actually what describes the shell of the person if they stayed stagnant at that phase. Is that so?
So the shell could be on every degree if you stay there. So
right, but the shell for someone in phase 2 would be described as lack of worth in the method versus someone who got into a shell in phase 3. It's because of my fault or someone else's fault. The reason why I had kind of like a question mark is because in phase 3 it seems you're cleaning you're discerning, you're sort of like trying to find that merge the distance between that disparity of the initial versus the faith or the goal. And I felt as if my fault is actually something very different than someone else's fault. But nonetheless, my fault has to be discerned, because it is recognizing that it's that this perception, that the disparity in perception is from our end, versus what we want to clean up, that the merge of the gap that we're trying to put together, if you will, or to have met. Does that make sense? Yeah, but the idea is that, remember that the reason why my fault or somebody else's fault is in the same box, could think it would be different. You'd think that my fault or somebody else's fault would be two different things. But the idea is that we're dealing with sort of like a science here. We're dealing with an observation. And the idea is, if you're going to that like blaming mentality, that victimization, either of, oh, it's me or it's somebody else, that's basically called darkness. Instead of focusing on your future, you're sort of focusing on the vessel. You're focusing on someone's doing something wrong, either it's me or somebody else. You're in that blaming, in that sort of victim mentality. And the idea is to move into the faith, which is more of a sort of when we say faith, it's not just not doing anything. It's actually working. Most of the work is actually done in the phase 4, in the spirit phase, where you're sort of doing the actual work to actually move to your next phase. Okay, I accept the explanation of it. It just seems that right now, where it says my fault, maybe I'm interpreting it a little bit different. Like for me, in order to have a purpose to form the gap between this disparity, there has to be a recognition of the current position. And for me, that's my fault. That's what I'm interpreting, that here's your current position and what are you trying to clean? What are you trying to find the gap between? And for that, I have to realize that it's between how I'm perceiving right now and how I'm going to perceive in the future. And that, how I perceive it right now, the details that I currently have right now, is how I can find the gap and therefore put in more details that will help me get to how I will perceive it in the future. Exactly. You're doing thinking and not emotion. And when we say it's my fault, somebody else's fault, it's normally an emotional feeling. And not an observation. So if you're observing, then it's not called a fault. It's more like, this is my current state, this is my future state, and I'm going to bridge the gap between. Right? It's like, you work, you're given something, you see it's not finished, you have to finish it. So you have to be aware it's not finished and know what you have to do to actually bridge the gap to make it finished. But when you go into the whole like, oh, it was that person's fault, or oh, it's my fault, I didn't do this right, you're going to the emotional thing. And that's normally what like enables people to fall into shells, is normally emotion. I understand it. That makes now sense. Thank you. Opposite role. Explanation. Indeed, we should understand the reflected light from the screen and how it became our new perception after the barrier, since initially it was but a rejection of reality. Thus, it is now serving an opposite role from its original behavior. What we can see here is the whole path that we basically go from when we're born until we cross the barrier. And the idea is that at the beginning, in phase 1 in humanity, we have our egoism, and we have the root that surrounds us, which is basically our past that created us. And most of what humanity deal, they either deal with their current state or they deal with their past, right? Like even religion deals with the past. You're dealing with the creator created me, let's talk about him. My parents created me, let's talk about them. Let's talk about history. It's most of the interaction of humanity is dealing with the past and sort of how to take the past into the present, but mostly dealing with the past. And in phase 2, in the spiritual society, where your will to receive, you've got it just like you had in phase 1, but now you get your point in the heart, your will to bestow. You've suddenly got this future point. And this sort of puts you in chaos. That's why, it's phase 2, where you're like, on one hand, you still want to deal with the creator, which is in the past, but you've got this point, which is like trying to deal with the future. And you basically get stuck like a sandwich in between the past, the present, and the future. And then in phase 3, in the group, unlike in phase 2, where you were told to sort of stop focusing on the ego and you should be focusing on the point in the heart. It's all about the point in the heart, and that's what you actually want. And the point in the heart in the end will become the screen. And you're like, you try to bestow with each other, but the problem is that the point in the heart is still inside the egoism.
it's still inside the ego, and therefore you can't actually, by focusing on the point in the heart, get anywhere, because the point in the heart is not powerful enough. The ego is more powerful than the point in the heart, but still not powerful enough either. So the idea is in phase 3, you shift back to the ego and start increasing your egoism, which starts to not only put pressure on the point in the heart and actually make the point in the heart grow from inside, but actually starts to pressure it from the outside and starts to start pushing it out. And that's, you can see in phase 4 in the individual, where you're just putting all your effort on the ego, which just starts really putting loads and loads of pressure on the point in the heart. And then finally the point in the heart gets born outside of the will to receive, outside of the ego, and you feel the restriction. This becomes your screen. So you can see it's a lot like having a baby, right? You've got basically the mother, which is like the will to receive. Then you've got the fetus, and you're sort of like, what do I want? I want the baby. It's like, yeah, but you can't pull the baby out. It's not grown yet. So you actually invest in the mother, and you give her good food, and she gives nutrients to the baby. So you're not dealing with the baby directly. You're dealing with the baby through the mother. And then in phase 4, you basically tell the mother, start pushing. And she starts pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. And then at the last moment, when she's pushed enough, then you shift from the egoism, from the mother, you shift to the point in the heart, to the baby, and then you actually deal with the baby and pull out the baby, and then the baby is born.
In terms of 1.1, 1.2, and so forth, how did you distribute the numbers here?
So it's basically phase 1. So phase 1 goes from 1.1 to 1.2. Phase 2 is from 1.3 to 2.2. Phase 3 is from 2.3 to 3.2. And then phase 4 is from 3.3 all the way to 4.4. And then finally,
what got me
across the barrier.
I keep forgetting, that even though 1.3 and 1.4 are sort of like phase 1, they're actually the beginning of phase 2. I keep making that mistake.
The idea is, you can look at it either for sort of, you can either look at it on the phase level, or you can look at it from sort of, you could say, the work of the point in the heart. So we say in 1.3, that's when you get the passive point in the heart, but you're not yet in the spiritual society. The solution for the passive point in the heart is the spiritual society. And then you get an active point in the heart. And then the solution for an active point in the heart is the group. And then you get an intensive point in the heart. The solution for that is to reach the individual phase, and so on.
Okay, this is very similar to how rain is formed, I guess you could say. Is it that the coarseness, as we build more coarseness, it builds the clothing, which is the point in the heart?
Yes.
And then what? But isn't the clothing supposed to sort of create new coarseness as well, or create a new desire? I mean, like the rain dropping part, the clothing part, to the coarseness?
Well, when the clothing sort of drops rain, that's basically you're moving into your next state.
Right, which is
a state of abundance, right?
Okay, so but the effort really is, it's more the building the coarseness part, right? Well, what I was saying, okay, so as you're building more of the coarseness part, as a result of building more coarseness, the clothing gets built more as well, right?
Yeah, you're basically injecting the coarseness into the clothing, and that's what creates the screen, which is the hardness.
What do you say about this? You guys are talking about clothing. What do you exactly have a problem with that?
What do you see?
You guys are using the terminology of clothing, and I have a problem with clothing. So could you explain a little bit what you mean when you say clothing?
So the idea is that when you're in any situation, you've got your current state, which is called coarseness, and you've got your future state, which you want to clothe, you want to sort of surround it, you want to sort of either reach it or bring it to you, and that's called clothing, that's your future. So you've got this interplay between your current state and your future state. So you've got there's basically three sort of degrees. You've got poor. A poor person is when he has clothing, he has this future. He's like, I want to be rich, but there's no means to actually get there. He has no coarseness. Right? He hasn't got a current state to actually help him reach that future state. Then you've got the middle class, which they have coarseness. They have all the abilities. They're actually very smart and got all these sort of technical know-how and the abilities and qualities and skills, but they have no future goal. They have no actual thing that they want to grow into. And then you've got the rich, which have both coarseness and clothing. That is, they have their goal, and they have the means to get there as well. It says, "Who is rich, which is happy with his part." And most people explain it as in, you should be happy with what you have. And it's like, no, you should be happy with what you're going to get. You don't have anything right now. What's the point of being happy with what you got? It's about being happy with what you will get. And that is a rich person that's able to use his current state and inject it into the future to actually bring it down, like the ring example.
You say with poor people, you say that they have no coarseness, but they have clothing, they have aspiration. Like, we're talking about, let's say, people, poor people in Africa,
Yes.
You're saying they have no coarseness, they have no present state. What does that mean, really? They have clothing.
They have no means to actually improve their lives.
Again?
They have no means to improve their lives. They don't have infrastructure. They don't have sort of opportunities to actually make their lives better.
Okay, so it's
greed, but they've got no ability to actually make it happen.
Right, and some like middle class people have that infrastructure available, everything, all the endless possibilities of what's possible for them to use. They have their coarseness, but you're saying they have no clothing. They have what? No aspiration? Because I can argue that they do have aspiration and they do have goals.
They don't have aspiration which is high enough. It's sort of, their aspirations are within their current skill set. They don't have an aspiration to go higher than themselves. They have no desire to actually push themselves forward.
And the ones that do they reach it?
Which are called rich.
Okay.
Right? If you look in society, the difference between the rich and the middle class is that the rich not only have a goal, but they can have the means to actually get there. The middle class have they have the skill set. They just have no actual desire to actually push themselves, forward.
The way I'm looking at it is like this. Phase 1, poor. They don't have a direction and they don't have a desire. Phase 2, they have a direction.
Poor. Then they're not poor. Phase 1 is not poor. Because if you have no clothing, then it doesn't, and you have no means to get there, then how are you poor? You're just who you are. There's no sort of relationship, you could say.
So what do they have?
They just are. There's no actual sort of...
Oh, okay.
They're not poor. Okay. It's like, I want to reach something and I can't reach it.
Okay.
Phase 2 is poor. Because in phase 2, they have clothing and they have no coarseness. They are always like, let's leave our ego outside. Let's just...
They have a purpose, they have a direction, but they don't really have a desire for it, or they don't even have a direction.
No, they have a direction. They want to cross the barrier. They want to reach Bestowal and all this stuff, but they have no actual means. Like, they're not using the means to actually get there, which is their egoism. So they don't have the egoism that is required to actually cross the barrier. So they're constantly focusing on the goal. They're like poor people, like, one day I'll be rich, but aren't actually doing they have no means to actually get there. And even
so
the means.
So you would say that they have clothing, but they don't have coarseness? How would you describe it?
Right, so they have the point in the heart, which is the clothing, and they don't have the egoism to back it up, which is the coarseness.
Okay. And then at stage 3, you start building your coarseness.
Exactly. And then you have a situation where you have the coarseness, you have the means to get there, but you still don't have enough clothing.
Meaning your goal is not as clear as it needs to be?
Exactly.
Meaning like...
relative to the egoism.
You are looking for the right direction. Meaning you were sort of like in the general direction in phase 2. In phase 3, you're sort of like fine-tuning the direction.
Exactly. And then in phase 4, it's called...
And in phase 4, when you already have the exact direction you want to go, then you're building the coarseness.
Yeah, and you're just working the coarseness to actually get there, and that's why you're rich.
That's a great example. I agree with Maria. And it feels like birth, literally. Because then, as you said, like, at first there's nothing, and then there's a fetus, but can't do anything because it's inside the mother, the ego. And then the way to grow the fetus, or to put it in a place where it can start growing, should I say, is to take it out of the mother. And the only way to take it out of the mother is to invest in the mother, which is the ego, the coarseness. And the more you invest in the mother, the higher the coarseness goes. And as a result of that, the baby is being pushed out. And only then there's a baby, and you can shift to it.
Exactly. And you can see that is why, for example, the reason why spiritual society can never actually implement mutual guarantee is because you basically got like two circles, right? It's like thinking of the point in the heart like a magnet. And this is sort of like a hard enclosure. If you've got two magnets in two enclosures, it doesn't matter how strong those magnets are, they'll never touch each other because they're surrounded by this hard enclosure. The only way those magnets are going to touch each other is if you take them outside of the hard enclosure. So as long as the point in the heart is inside the ego, you can never actually connect with somebody else. You can never actually have mutual guarantee with somebody else. You need to have that point in the heart to grow into a screen and exit the ego. Then you can actually connect with somebody else and reach mutual guarantee with them. Actually share internal power, which is what mutual guarantee is all about. You can't share internal power if you're in phase 2. So you can see on one hand, phase 2 and the root phase look like the focus is on the same plot. It's like in phase 2 you want bestowal, and in the root phase you want bestowal. The difference is these two phases, phase 3 and phase 4, that say, oh yeah, by the way, to reach true bestowal and not just bestowal inside, reception, you have to focus on reception, which sounds counterintuitive. It's like, I thought I want bestowal. Why are you telling me, why I want the baby? Why are you telling me to invest in the mother? It's like, well, if you invest in the mother, she'll make a healthy baby, right? But it sounds counterintuitive when we think about it in spirituality. It's like, you're saying in order to bestow up and to start receiving more, that doesn't make sense. And that's why it's so hard for them to actually invest in their ego and actually advance to actually cross the barrier.
Like investing on the relationship between a man and a woman, as opposed to investing yourself in the child. Investing more in the relationship between the man and the woman, and that will trickle down into the child as well, right?
Exactly. If the parents are happy, probably the children will be happy as well. And what the problem is, many parents, they focus so much on the children, and they fight between themselves, and it actually makes a terrible situation for the children. So they think, oh, we're investing so much energy in the children. They're actually making their lives miserable for themselves and for the children. But by actually investing in their relationship with each other, the result of that is that the children will be happier. Like it's a known fact that if the parents are happy, the children will be happy as well. And what normally happens is that the parents aren't happy, and then the children aren't happy either. Not truly happy. The dilemma of choice. I shall explain that with an experience from life. Our nature is to cherish and favor choice, and to despise and loathe restrictions. Hence, when we arrive to a myriad of opportunities, we will avoid making a decision, even if we really need to make a choice, since we feel limited by our resolution. So what we're doing here is we're giving a different explanation than Balaslam's story of the host and the guest. And we're giving something that is not class specific. That is, it's not everyone feels that shame when they're in this host and guest situation. And the idea that this example sort of works best for all the classes. And this is something that we're constantly dealing with all the time. So we're constantly in situations where, we reach a situation where we're in front of a lot of choice, and we don't know what to choose. On one end, we know what we want, but the problem is that if I choose that, then I'm losing all the other potentials. It's like someone trying to choose the career path. It's like, if I know I want to become a doctor, but if I become a doctor, then I won't become a programmer. If I become a doctor, I won't be a dancer. If I become a doctor, I won't be a lawyer. So it's like, by choosing a doctor, what if I don't really like it as a doctor and I might be losing all these other career opportunities? Or we go into the supermarket and we see a certain kind of, tomato paste, and we see some others, and we're like, well, if I choose this, what if it's not as delicious as the others, and I'm losing out? It's this constant dilemma of, if I actually choose something, I lose the potential, and the potential is always much wider, there's more choice in potential than in actuality. If I actually choose something, that's one, but the potential is many. It's like, and this is just in so many things in life. It's like, you want to choose a partner. It's like, if I choose that partner, what if there's other partners there and I lose on them? The potential men is so much bigger than the specific man that I choose. And this dilemma will constantly sort of hitting it in all areas of life.
Probably going to be using this sermon throughout the session, but the following passed in my mind, that having all of these options prior to making the selection, the reason that I love it is because it gives me so many good feelings, because each one of these options that I have inside of me, that I'm holding on to, exists inside of me. And I can sense them, and I feel it gives such a great feeling, which means I've got a lot of different feelings, and I call it one great feeling of having all these options ahead of me. But then you move from the feeling stage to the knowing stage, to the restricting stage, to the judgmental stage, to the thought, and you make a decision. And you eliminate all the other potentials that you have, and you make your selection. And that's already a stage above the emotion. That's already when you have figured out your emotions and you can choose one of them and implement it.
Reception into bestowal.
Reception into bestowal. Bal Hasulam. Yet when his friend sufficiently implores him until it is clear that by eating he would do a big favor to his friend, he consents to eat, as he no longer feels that he is receiving a gift and that his friend is the giver. On the contrary, he, the guest, is the giver, who is doing his friend a favor by receiving things good from him. Thus, you find that although hunger and appetite are vessels of reception designated to eating, and that that person has sufficient hunger and appetite to receive his friend's meal, he still could not taste a thing, due to the shame. Yet, as his friend implored him and he rejected him, new vessels for eating began to form within him, since the power of his friend's pleading and the power of his own rejections, as they finally accumulate into a sufficient amount that turns the measure of reception into the measure of bestowal. Yet, when the importance of our limited choice is more than the lost potential of other opportunities, we make a decision and choose limitation over the abundance of options, as we no longer feel our decision as limitation, rather as an opportunity to move forward. On the contrary, we now view our choice as profusion instead of curtailment. Thus, you find that although our specific selection was designed for us, we could not make a decision due to the feeling of lost potential. Yet, as we increase importance of our choice through discernment, a new perception is formed within us. Since the combination of the vision of our future and our own will power to reject the other options as they accumulate, finally amass to a sufficient intensity that turns the restriction into abundance.
Importance of choice. Explanation. Yet when the importance of our limited choice is more than the lost potential of other opportunities, we make a decision and choose limitation over the abundance of options, as we no longer feel our decision as limitation, rather as an opportunity to move forward. On the contrary, we now view our choice as profusion instead of curtailment. So the idea is that when...
Zachary, just a minute. What's profusion and what's curtailment? I'm sorry, I'm not feeling new words.
So profusion is like positivity, you could say, and curtailment is like loss. We view our choice as something sort of not only positive, but will actually sort of give us abundance, right? And curtailment is like less. It's like I feel a loss.
Okay.
So the idea is that what enables us to shift from seeing our selection, which we see at the beginning as limitation, how do we turn the potential into limitation and the actual into choice and abundance? So the idea is that when you have importance of the goal of what you actually want, and that becomes more important than the sort of potential loss, the abstract choices that you have, you're like, if I choose this, I actually get something. And everything that I've sort of lost, I never actually had it, so I haven't actually lost anything. So it's better for me to move forward and actually make a choice and deal with it. And if I've made the wrong choice, then I'll make another choice afterwards. But I'll move from choice to choice instead of constantly living in a world of, oh, I could choose anything I want and never actually make a choice. And so many people, they choose a life of mediocre because they have the potential to do whatever they want. And they never actually choose anything because they sort of, they fall into enjoying that abundance of choice, of potential, and never actually choosing something and moving forward and actually implementing in their life and making their lives better.
I have one question. Like, in my personal life, it is easy for me to stick with one choice. Like when I go to a restaurant, it's always the same plate. When like if I were to choose something about a general thing, it will always be the same thing. So this is also like this problem also depends on the personality of the person.
Well, the idea is that in your situation, you're not looking at the potential. You're not looking at the menu. You're like, I want this plate and I'm getting it each time. Then you've not got a sort of an internal battle between choices and selection, right? For you, there's no potential and there's no selection. You're just doing what you're used to doing. So that you're not actually choosing each time the same plate. You're just, that's your default.
And what's wrong with that, really?
Well, there's nothing wrong with that. We're talking about here where someone has where he has this internal battle. He wants all these other things, and he has to choose one of them. It's like when you go to a phone store, and you've got like a myriad of different phones of different sizes, and you're like, should I go for this? Should I go for that? Should I go for an Apple phone? Should I go for an iPhone? Should I go for a Samsung phone? Should I go for an LG phone? Should I have a small battery, a big battery? Should I have a small screen, big screen? There are advantages of a small screen. I can hold it in one hand. The big screen, though, I can see more multimedia. And you basically get stuck in all these options and you actually choose anything. Right? Because you're like, well, if I choose this phone, well, maybe this phone is better. You choose this phone, what if this phone is better? So you actually have a potential landscape of choices that you would like, and you have to make one selection. So what you do is you sort of have to focus on the importance of sort of, first of all, figure out what you want, and then find the phone that matches, what you want, and actually choose it.
Are we speaking about material things?
This example works for anything. It works for spiritual and physical. This could work from phones to crossing the barrier. One of the reasons why people don't cross the barrier is because they just love the opportunity of, I could be in any phase I want without actually going to the next phase and moving on. They like the potential abundance of spirituality. I could be anywhere instead of actually being somewhere. Instead of actually moving through the phases and understanding this is my phase, this is my next phase, this is my phase, this is my next phase. And they prefer to just be in this situation where I have a potential, in my future I could be in any phase I want. And they basically get stuck in their current phase for a long time because if I actually make a selection, then I'm actually having to move forward and I'm losing that sort of that enjoyment from the potential that I could be in any phase. And it's one of the reasons, for example, that people don't cross the barrier because they're like, What you mean? I'm going to have to actually get it? I'm actually going to be limiting and actually only focusing causality on a specific part of reality? Before, it's like, this is my playground. I could be responsible for anything. And it's like, yes, you could be responsible for everything. Let's be responsible for something. Let's do a limitation. That will actually be abundance, because you can move from limitation to limitation. And then in the end, you'll get everything that you want. And the problem is that people want it all at the beginning, and it doesn't work that way. You have to go through limitation, through selection, to actually have a great life.
Yes, but I totally agree with you, of course, but, well, why of course? This time, I agree with you. Next time, I will tell you you're talking nonsense. But till we get there, what did I want to say? Yeah, that, making a choice does really feel like giving up on things, because you really do give up on all those things which are the potentials. But if you're not thinking about it clearly, you actually feel like you're losing something which is not potential, because for you it's very real. It's a real potential for you. You can really do it, but you don't, because you just want it as a potential. But the sensation is of loss. And that's what stops people from proceeding, because they think they're going to lose. While the reality is that you're not losing anything, A, because you don't have anything. You've got everything in potential, so you're bluffing yourself, A. B, the secret is that if you want everything, you need to choose one thing. And you know what? When you choose one thing and you have it, you will discover that all the other options that you've given, so-called felt you're giving up on, not only that they're waiting for you out there, but you can actually see it much clearer now. And after you've taken one, you make the next decision, and you know that by making that decision, you're giving up on nothing. You're just taking those decisions and taking them out of potentials, those options, moving them from the potential side to the actuality side. But you're doing it stage by stage. You have to start somewhere.
Definitely. Potential versus actual. Thus you find that although our specific selection was designed for us, we could not make the decision due to the feeling of lost potential. Yet, as we increase the importance of our choice through discernments, a new perception is formed within us, since the combination of the vision of our future and our own willpower to reject the other options, as they accumulate, finally amass into sufficient intensity that turns the restriction into abundance. And this is the whole idea of the difference between a circle and a line. A circle represents potential. There's no discrimination. I could choose anything. We're all equal, right? That's a circle concept. And the line represents selection, where the idea is that I'm actually only choosing a sliver of all this potential, but actually have it. And in a line, you've got a path. You've got higher and lower. It's like if I go higher, I'm closer to achieving something. If it's lower, I'm sort of at the beginning of achieving something. And there's actually sort of milestones and sort of points that you can see your advancement. But with a circle, there's no advancement. It's just in potential. It's like a lot of time people in phase 2, they're like, we could all cross the barrier. And it's like, well, why not cross one at a time and, actually even help each other to cross one at a time. Focus on this, choose a certain member and focus on him, get him across the barrier, and then move on to the next member. No, we're all meant to cross together. So by saying you can all cross together, it means no one will cross, and you'll all just live in that potential of one day we will cross the barrier. Instead of actually crossing and seeing the phases and actually going through them, and yes, one friend will cross before the other, but in the end, we will all cross and be together in the end of correction. Instead of all being at the beginning of, we could all one day cross the barrier.
It seems that thought of everyone crossing together would be impossible to get to that one selection, that one choice, because everybody it would just, I just don't understand how it would be possible, because just the array of choice valuations that everyone has just in ourselves, just to find our own choice and conviction inside that it's the right choice, and expecting everyone to make that same level of conviction for that to happen seems impossible.
Yeah,
I don't understand. I don't understand what you feel is impossible, Jen.
The understanding that one soul part at a time crossing makes more logical sense than the thought that a mass all making the same level of conviction, the conviction that's necessary at the right time, at the same time, doesn't seem possible.
I don't think it's possible for everybody to pass at the same time. I think it's totally impossible.
Right, I guess that was my point.
Yeah.
Just a second.
I have one question.
Yeah.
For instance, if I were to make a choice in regards to a spouse before the max sum, I know the one I would pick. But let's say I leave that choice after Gemarti Kun, then I would have more other choices, and my choice would not really be that, like the choice wouldn't be the same as the max sum. Is that right? Is that or like your likes and wants stay the same?
I didn't hear the question.
The question was when you get to end of correction, do you like lose options that you've had beforehand? Meaning, like, if you're in a stage where you think you know who you want to marry, then, or make your partner or spouse or whatever, then does advancement actually gonna take that person away from me? That was the question.
Well, the idea is that, your desires are going to change from when even before the barrier all the way to end correction. So you won't know what you will want until then. It's like someone saying, at the age of 5, can you promise me I'll like the same girl when I reach the age of 30? It's like, I can't promise that to you. I don't know what will be in between. I don't know the situations that they'll go through. I don't know the situations that you're going to go through. So I can't tell you that, your childhood friend, you'll marry her. And that's basically what you're asking. You're asking, will I know in the future at end of correction whether you'll still want what you want before the barrier? I'd say probably not. Because you don't actually know what you want right now.
Exactly. You should know you don't know what you want.
But that's also a realization that people have to make, to realize that they don't actually know what they want.
Yeah, but this is part of our maturation. We're maturing.
Exactly.
We're fetuses before we cross the barrier.
No, it's like a 5-year-old wanting to be rich. And for him, rich is $50. And he's like, oh, I want to be rich. Will I be rich when I'm older? It's like, yes, you will have $50 when you're older, but that won't be rich. So the definitions change as well along the way.
I felt a little bit of concern in Danielle's voice, like a sensation that, advancement, or as he called it, getting to end of correction or crossing the barrier, whatever, means losing. And I want to, if I may, relate to that. How should I say it? You're not losing anything, Danielle, because you don't have anything. You see, the lady that you think you might want to marry, you don't really want to marry her right now. You don't really have her. Because if you really wanted to marry her, you would have already married her. You just like the thought about marrying her, but you don't really have anything other than that thought. So you don't really have anything, really. And what would happen as you progress is that you will really discover what you want. And the good thing, and that's the only thing that can be said, I think, and people can reflect on that, is that you don't really care what you're going to find out that you want, because you're going to be getting just what you want, and you're going to be happy.
The problem is that you can get stuck in not advancing because you're feeling the lost potential and constantly focusing on, will I lose this? Will I lose that? What it will be like then? What will it be like then? You're constantly focusing on the lost potential instead of focusing on the future. Actually understanding that this is just a natural progression of your growth, and sort of reveal it to yourself what you actually want. And it's like, it's not like this path is like forced on you on the outside. It's like, I'm going to tell you what you will like. It's like, oh, when you reach into correction, you'll like Coca-Cola, you'll like monogamy, you'll like a big house, and you're like a Corvette. You're like, but what if I want a Ford? It's like, no, end correction, only Corvettes. It's like, it's not like that at all. Everyone, when they reach into correction, find out about their own desires. That means if you actually have a desire, then you will have it at end correction. And if that desire was a facade, it wasn't real, then you won't have it at end correction. So the whole idea is to reveal yourself. And if you're afraid of revealing yourself, then you just won't advance, because the whole idea of advancing is to constantly reveal more of yourself.
Sakai, when we choose, are we acting like the creator?
Every choice we make, we're getting closer to becoming the creator.
So if we keep fooling around and making choices, that will keep us away also, right?
Well, we're talking about making choices about advancement, and the thing is that in advancement, you've only got one choice, which is to move forward. It's not like you have at every point, you could be like, oh, I could take a left turn, or I could take a right turn. It's like, no, you can either stay where you are or move forward. And if you stay where you are, that's considered a shell. And because you can also, sort of like fall back to like previous phases, like in feeling them, but you're still in your current phase. Or you can move forward. That's your only option. It's like you've got a train, you can either like press the gas or remove your pedal, your foot from the pedal. You can only move forward or stop. Move forward or stop. That's your only choice. And that's making a choice each time. That's what it says, that the creator puts your hand on the good fortune and says, take it. Like, if he's already put me on the good fortune, why does he say that I have to take it? Well, it turns out people don't always realize that it's good fortune, and therefore they don't always take it. So you have to realize that it's good fortune, and then you can take it.
All right. Now, desire. Desire will make us make a choice, right?
Who's going to make us choice?
Desire. I mean, if I have, desire. So if I have a huge desire, it would be easier for me to make a choice. Because what I want to ask is how would one get, how could one get a much bigger desire for something? By
collecting discernments. Right? As it says, as we increase importance of our choice through discernments, a new perception is formed within us. The whole path of growth is only by collecting discernments on our behavior and on our future state and our current state and the differences between them, and then the understanding of those phases. That is what advances us.
All right.
And it doesn't help learning about some things happening outside of us, all these different forces, learning about my history. All those things just won't help you advance. It's all about your present state, your future state, and mapping between them, the discernments, to actually get there.
Where are you at, Cedric?
I'm sort of lost. I'm getting my way. I'll get there.
But when you're lost, where are you?
I don't know. Sakai for sure will have a number for me.
He's doubly lost.
Yeah, but where is he lost?
2.3.
Yeah. Pain. Yeah. Well, let me tell you this. Let me tell you something that helped me a lot. Because it's hard to give up on options and give up on all the things we have for something which is unclear. Because to be honest, what do we really know about a future state? We know very little about it. We only realize how little we knew about it when we get there and we look back and we say, oh, did I know nothing about this? I only just had fragments of it. So it's basically asking you to give up on something secure that you do have. Even if it's fears and pains, but you have them. Giving up on these for something which is vague. And for me, this was a problem right through the process. And I resolved that problem very simply, being I have a mathematical inclination, so I summarized it to myself with an equation that served me all the way and still does. It's a very simple equation. It says x plus 1 is bigger than x. Now, x is my current state. X plus 1 is my future state. So no matter how good you feel where you are, how full you feel where you are, or whatever else, you should know one thing, that your next stage is much better. X plus 1 is always, by definition, bigger than X. So if that helps, I hope.
And by collecting discernments, you can actually make that happen.
Yeah, that's nice, Yoshi. I like to say, Cedric, it is a hard journey, but it's very worthwhile. It's a beautiful thing we're doing here.
Well, I know, thanks. And what I believe is that I just have to find the right path and move in that direction, because I do have desire to get to the other side. That's for sure. Thanks.
The key is the group. The group is the key.
Remember, the idea is that if we actually have a desire, we implement it. So if someone hasn't crossed the barrier, it's because they don't actually have the desire to cross the barrier. And it's very important for us to reveal that to ourselves. So then we can actually use the environment by collecting discernment to actually build that desire to actually cross the barrier.
That's the most damning statement, I'll tell you. It is. You're going, because pre-barrier, we're going, what the hell are you talking about? I want to cross the barrier.
Exactly. There's so many people say, oh, of course I want to cross the barrier. And then you say, okay, so just do this, do that, and actually cross and advance in the phase. They're like, no. No, I have a problem with this, I have a problem with that concept.
Yes, and we're not 100%. And you have to be 100%. That's the no lip service. Anything less than 100% is just lip service, right?
Exactly. And it requires dedication.
And you found out our weaknesses, and you told us, you made your suggestions for what we should do. And what was it Mark had to do that was holding up?
It was focusing on the present sort of fault, like sort of it's my fault or somebody else's fault.
Right.
He was focusing on the light. He was focusing on sort of, oh, I'm stuck where I am. This is terrible. Instead of saying, let's focus on the future and actually reach there. It's very enjoyable to get stuck where you are and enjoy sort of, oh, I'm not advancing. Why am I not advancing?
Yeah, you're getting a feeling. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
You enjoy it. And I worked with Gabrielle there. Go to church.
Power.
What's Cedric? What soul type is he?
Cedric, what soul type are you?
I don't know.
Still too early to tell. Power of rejection.
Power over rejection, Al-Hasulam. In the end, he can see that by eating, he will be doing a big favor and bring great contentment to his friend by eating. In that state, new vessels of reception to receive his friend meals were made within him. Now it is considered that the power of his rejection has become the essential vessel in which to receive the meal, and not the anger and the appetite, although they are actually the usual vessel of reception. Explanation. In the end, we can see that making a choice, we are doing ourselves a big favor and bringing great contentment to ourselves by our selection. In that state, a new perception is formed within us. Now it is considered that the force over our willpower has become the essential conduit in which to perceive reality, and not the sensation of a limitation, although this is actually what we are doing.
Selection. Explanation. In the end, we can see that by making a choice, we are doing ourselves a big favor and bring great contentment to ourselves by our selection. In that state, a new perception is formed within us. Now, it is considered that that force of our willpower has become the essential conduit in which to perceive reality, and not the sensation of limitation, although this is actually what we are doing. So we can go over the parts again of the spiritual face. So we said that you've got the direct light, the Oriya Shar, that is reality. It comes, it hits the screen, the Malchuta Amizdavega, the mating kingdom, and reflected light, which means the screen vibrates up and clothes the reality, saying that we're going to be the cause and not the consequence. The light that we cannot handle, you could say the lost potential, is the surrounding light, the Or Makif, the reality that we're not going to be dealing with causality over. This screen, which is called the Peh, which deals with, the Rosh of the head. This is, what we're going to do in potential. And then the actuality is received in the Guf, which is the body, where you've got the Toch, the inner, where the selection, that is what we actually made a choice of, what we're actually, the reality that we're going to take causality over, we're going to feel that within us. That's Or Pnimi, inner light, which is the combination of the direct light, Oriya Shar, which is reality, and our screen, which is going to do that causality, saying, I'm going to clothe this and say, I made this happen. I'm taking, what I'm seeing is a manifestation of me, and that is called Or Pnimi, inner light. Then you've got the Malchuta Mesayemet, the ending kingdom, which is basically this same screen when it sort of expands like a balloon, right? And this ends sort of the pressure, which is called the tabur, the navel. This is what's saying, this is the maximum I can handle. And what I can't handle, I'm going to reject. And the rejection, the feeling of rejection, is called the soft, the end, which is also called Or Chazer, reflected light. And this is the lost potential. But the idea is we actually feel good in this part, in the end. We're actually feeling good that we lost that potential, because we understand that by not receiving that lost potential, we can actually focus on our selection, on what we actually chose.
Well, this is the following crossed my mind, okay? We receive all the light into us at the end of the day. But we break the light into two parts. One, which we can receive with us being the cause, meaning in causality. We perceive that and we allow it into our perception, which is this accordion spreading down. And then there's another part of light that we get, but we choose not to perceive, because we don't yet know how to perceive it as me, as the causality, and that's the lost potential at the very bottom. That's exactly my mind. So why, if that's the case, and if we're getting all of the light, and you can imagine that the light is 100% of it is within the box, that, this rectangle, why did they bother to go through they could have given a simpler explanation, just like, all of the light goes in, we perceive only part of it, which is the part that we can perceive with us being as the cause, and we choose not to perceive the rest because we don't want to fall back to, to being where we were beforehand. And instead of saying that, they start this whole story with Or Makif. There's got to be something there,
So this is structure, right? It's like, saying, why are you talking about, jargon of all different ingredients? Just give me, a painkiller. It's like, yeah, you could say it's just a painkiller, or you could talk about all the structure and parts of it. It's like, there's a human body. I can do something. I can pick up a pen. It's like, oh yeah, but you've got you've got meat, and you've got skin, and you've got bones, and yeah, you could talk about all those parts, or you could just say picking up a pen, but they serve two different purposes. So the idea is to combine, and that's what we try to do here, where we try to combine the actual usage of it, which is like picking up a pen, but also talk about the structure of how we're built. So on one hand, we're talking about like you make a selection and you get enjoyment of, the lost potential. And it's like, that's one way you could say it. And you can also talk about the parts of, we've got the pear, which is the mouth, and the idea is that the light hits it and then reflects, and it also reflects down and expands the screen down, and that becomes inner light, which is the combination of the direct light with the reflected light from the screen, and those are called the different lights, nanachi, nefesh, ruach, neshama, chai, relaxation, modulation, protection, expression, and singularity. And you can talk about these parts, and the idea is what we try to do here is combine both the science of Kabbalah, which is the structure, and the practical application of it, which is advancement.
Yes, but my question remains, because, or maybe I didn't hear the explanation, it feels to me that their explanation with the Ol Makif sort of like not as direct as I would have put it.
Well, you're not actually receiving in your perception. You're not actually putting focus on it. That's considered, it's not in your perception. We're not talking about your physical eyes. We're not talking about your senses. Right? We're talking about what is your focus. So what you're not putting focus on is surrounding. It surrounds you. It's like, it's potential. It's like a future. In the future, I'll deal with it. That's considered.
Right, but you wrote lost potential. And for me, this is sufficient to describe all the light, which I have not received in the appropriate perception.
This is not all the light. In the lost potential, it's a sensation, it's a feeling about the lost potential. But it's not the actual lost potential itself.
Uh-huh.
It's a sensation you feel.
So maybe it's worth pointing it out somehow. I don't know. It's not the lost potential. It's more like the sensation
of lost potential. Yeah, but the feeling of lost potential is never the lost potential itself.
If you're a potential loss, that's more clear, but potential loss is like more of like, explains it, I think, better. Because it's like a feeling, what your potential, what you lost. Here it's like lost, but I don't know.
Well, you lost potential. It's like you lost what you could have had. So you lost the potential of what you could have had.
Yeah, but what do you have of that lost potential? You have a sensation, you have a knowledge, you have perception. What do you have with respect to that lost potential?
You have an emotion about it of like, this is what I didn't get. But it's
why are you not writing?
But it's not actually what you didn't get. If you have, let's say, you went into a shop, you had 5 phones, right? And you choose one phone. Let's say you choose an iPhone. It's like, now you can have a sensation about you didn't choose the Samsung, you didn't choose the LG, and you didn't choose the Sony. But the sensation of not choosing them is not actually having the phones.
True. So but you do have a sensation. You do have a sensation of losing them.
So that's lost potential, but it's not the actual things that you're not receiving, which is the surrounding light. So you're not actually experiencing the other phones. So the lack of experiencing those other phones is like surrounding light. But the sensation of, oh, I didn't get to use them, that's lost potential.
Okay, so once again, you're saying that the lost potential is a sensation, it's a feeling.
Yes. This is even the selection.
So why do you not want to write it down that the sof includes feeling of lost potential or sensation of lost potential, and putting lost potential next to the Ol Makif?
No, but the lost potential, this is what you actually feel inside your desire. We're talking about desires here. This is what you actually feel in your desire. You feel in your desire 2 parts. You feel the desire of your selection and the desire of the lost potential. That you lost the potential choices that you didn't make.
But I have a question. Isn't eventually that lost potential means less and less to you? In fact, the choice it's almost as if you don't even recognize the lost potential because the choice that was made was so great.
Yes.
Was so beneficial. So that sensation is determined by your phase, correct?
Exactly. And then the idea that the lost potential becomes less and less, and the selection grows. And we're not talking about quantity, so it's not like, you have to actually receive all the light as it's like some kind of sort of amount, like 100 kilos of light or whatever. The idea is that it's about the sensation that, exactly as you said, that you feel the lost potential's meaningless, and the selection just becomes so important. It becomes the main part of your life.
Contentment, such a contentment in your choice, right?
Exactly.
So I want to piggyback on what you said earlier. The whole box here that we're looking at is our set of desires, or let's call it our desire in general.
Yes.
And there are two parts to it. One is where we perceive, that's the accordion part. These are the desires which are being fulfilled. We are actually perceiving through those desires. And then there's another group of desires, which we call them the lost potential, in which we don't receive anything and we therefore don't perceive. In your example of the iPhones, we don't.
Well, we do receive. We do receive it. The lost potential is a feeling. We receive the sensation.
Yeah, we receive a feeling. Exactly. I was just about to get there. We don't actually receive what we want, which is, let's say, the Samsung and the LG. We are only left with the sensation of wanting those. These are left inside us as unfulfilled desires.
Yes.
That we would need to get back to later in the game and fulfill them. And when we're done fulfilling them, the accordion will go all the way down, and that's the end of correction.
So it's more what Jenny said, that it's not that you actually have to then try out all the other phones. It's just that your desire for, the iPhone that you got becomes so important, so great, that you just don't really care about the other phones. So they're not lost potential anymore. You don't see them as like potential I could have got. You don't see them as even potential. So your selection just grows and it reaches the end of the box, and that's considered end of correction. You just don't care about it at all.
But Sakai, the other time you said that the corporeal desires we should actually satisfy before the maximum, because after the maximum, like the pleasures from after the maximum will not satisfy that, so that the pleasures for, I don't know, food, whatever. So there's like for instance, in your case, you're with a wife and you have kids, and like you could have any woman you like, But so there's like, and you made that choice before you have cleaned your desires. So how can you explain that you are still with her?
Let me give you an example. You marry your girlfriend. So at the beginning, you still feel a loss of potential. Like there were other people I could have been with, and I wasn't with them. As you grow in your relationship, your selection grows. That is, you reach a point where I'm with my wife, not because there's my wife and there's other lost potential. No, there is no more lost potential. I want to be with my wife. My wife is my selection. All I care about is my wife. I couldn't care less about any other potential women. Couldn't care. So it's not that it's like, well, I'll try with my wife, and then I'll leave her, and then I'll try with another woman and leave, and try with another woman and leave, and then in the end I've tried all the women in the world, and therefore, I've received all the surrounding life. No. It is, I made a choice at the beginning, and it's like, people were saying, well, why did you get married? You're losing out on other people, da, da, da. And it's like you're thinking, well, yeah, I did make this choice, but yeah, I could have chosen these other people. That lost potential starts to reduce as I have more importance on the selection that I actually received. So then I don't care about that I'm not with other women. All I care about is I'm with the woman I chose and that I adore and I love.
Can we also? I'm sorry.
But sorry, Jenny. But one last thing. But when you make that choice, your desires weren't clean.
That is true. But as I cleaned my desires, I found that selection I actually had made already was the selection that I actually wanted. It enforced it. It made it stronger. So it's not all about like, oh, I thought I want something, and then when I reach into correction, it's something else. You'll find a lot of desires that you do currently have are the desires that you actually have.
Like the sushi?
What's the example of the sushi?
I don't know, like you like the sushi before the barrier and you still love the sushi, like these types of
Exactly.
taste.
Yeah, so it's not like all my desires change. It's not like, well, before the barrier, I liked, chicken, and after intercorrection, I'm a vegetarian. It's like, no. It puts emphasis on the desires that you currently have, and sort of reduces this idea of like, oh, maybe I have this, maybe I have that, maybe I have this, maybe I have that. You care less about lost potential, and you care more about the selection you actually make in life.
Can we say that the level of lost potential, let's see, how do I say this? The lower the level of lost potential, the closer you are to a clean desire.
Exactly.
So if that sensation of lost potential occurs, especially after endocorrection, and it's at a state where it's keeping you from making a decision, then that your desire is not clean. That desire that's in front of you is not clean. So you discern it, you scrutinize it, and determine what's not copacetic in that situation, and either it changes, or you're presented with another situation that is cleaned, closer to the point where the lost potential is lessened.
So there's two states. You've got before the barrier, which represents this concept of, I haven't actually made a selection yet. Right? And then I'm just like, trying things out, but I haven't actually made a selection. I haven't made a choice. Right? When I make a choice, that's called crossing the barrier. I've made a choice. Now that I've made this choice, I've still got this feeling of lost potential. I could have chosen this other people. Right? I could have chosen this, and that. I've lost that potential of other members I could have chosen. And as that reduces and your selection grows, when you've reached the point where your selection becomes full and you don't care about any potential, that's called end of correction. So
okay, excellent. So we go through this process with just about every situation that we're experiencing. This is just so fantastic to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, we can apply this to any situation.
Can you repeat the definition of the end of correction you just said?
End of correction is when you don't have any feelings, any emotion about lost potential. So when it's only about the selection, that's considered that the stream reaches until the bottom, and you've reached Kamaratikon, you've reached end of correction. So if we look at it on a corporeal situation, so let's say when you're dating various people, that's considered like you're before you're in a spiritual phase, which is a spiritual state. So, you haven't made a choice, and you're trying, and you're dating different people, and you're like, maybe this person, maybe that person, and you're still in the dating phase, and you still haven't made a selection. Once you've made a selection, you're like, okay, I'm now going to, be a boyfriend and girlfriend with this person, and we're going to have a stronger relationship. Now you're like, you still got this feeling behind, like, yeah, but I could have been with these other people, and yeah, we'll see. The stronger the relationship goes, that means the more that selection, you love that person that you've chosen more and more and more and more, then that lost potential just loses its meaning. It's like, well, I don't just do, I now, you marry the person, he's the love of your life, and you just don't care about all the potential men that you could have married.
I was saying, so if you're dating, you're going through different options, whatever, and let's say you make a choice, a selection, right?
Right.
But somewhere down the line, you say, no, this wasn't exactly what I was looking for.
So again, that can happen in corporeality, not in spirituality.
Well, we're talking about corporeality.
Right, corporeality, yeah. Then you would sort of return to a situation where you're going to have to make a selection again.
Right. But until you've come to that point where you've made the selection and the lost potential is basically gone, the selection has overtaken any lost potential, that's sort of like when you supposedly get like a spiritual parzuf, you could say, in like a corporal example.
Exactly.
And then what? That's end of correction at that point? Or is it just,
you get the spiritual parzuf, the concept of the things is when you've actually made a selection.
Okay, and then after
The
that
is when the screen sort of expands to the bottom and you've got no more lost potential. You've only got selection. All you care about is your selection.
yeah, but what if you're dating and you made a selection and you think that this is the one, and then somewhere down the line you're like, no, this is not going to work out. Then what you thought you had a spiritual partsuf. I mean, I know it's
you had a spiritual partsuf, but the idea is that you didn't actually sort of reach end of correction on that desire.
So then you go back to basically and no partsuf again.
Exactly.
Okay.
Which you can see that's one of the differences between the corporeal desire and the spiritual desire. With the corporeal desire, you can have this backtrack and stuff, and with spiritual, you can have a backtrack.
Right.
Yeah. Like you can fall into a shell, but once you've reached end of correction or reached any degree, you've reached it. Like once you get out of your shell, you're still in that same degree. It's not like you have to. It's not like you maybe reached end of correction, you fell into shell. Oh well, now you're going to start crossing the barrier again. It's like no, you reach any degree before the barrier, after end of correction, you fall into a shell. You get out of that shell, you're exactly where you were before.
Zakai, you can say that before barrier, the selection you do, it's all unconscious selection, and another thing.
No, you're making it conscious. It's a conscious selection. That's how you cross the barrier.
So, when you start to do these conscious selections, so that's the way we strength of willpower.
Exactly. The willpower is what we use to say, I don't want everything else.
Very great, thanks.
Coupling by striking.
Coupling by striking, Bahasalam, 16. From the above allegory between two friends, we can understand the matter of the zivug de chaka, coupling by striking, and the orze, reflected light, that rises through it, which then becomes new vessels of reception for the upper light, instead of Bihina Dalit, phase 4. We can compare the upper light, which strikes the Masach screen, and wants to expand into Bihina Dalit, phase 4, to the pleading to eat, because as he yearns for his friend to receive his meal, the upper light desires to spread to the receiver, and the Masach screen, which strikes the light and repels it, can be resembled to the friend's rejection and refusal to receive the meal, since he rejects his favor. Explanation. From the above experience between abundance and restriction, we can understand the matter of coupling by striking and the reflected light that rises from the screen, which then becomes a new perspective for reality, as we are the cause instead of the consequence. The light of the reality, which strikes our screen and wants to expand into our perception that we are the consequence instead of the cause, we can compare to the importance of our limitation to choose. Because as we yearn to make a choice, we attract that portion of reality into your perception. And the screen, which strikes the light, repelling our natural behavior to be reactive, can be resembled to our willpower to overcome the myriad of opportunities.
Coupling by striking. Explanation. Item 16. From the above experience between abundance and restriction, we can understand the matter of coupling by striking, and the reflected light that rises from the screen, which then becomes a new perspective for reality, as we are the cause instead of the consequence. The light of reality which strikes our screen and wants to expand into our perception, that we are the consequence instead of the cause. We can compare to the importance of our limitation to choose, because as we yearn to make a choice, we attract that portion of reality into our perception. And the screen, which strikes the light, repelling our natural behavior to be reactive, can be resembled to our willpower to overcome the myriad of opportunities. So exactly what we saw before, that here it's talking about that we've got cause and consequence. So the cause, this is the part that we're actually feeling that we are the cause of reality. And then the rest of it is where we say, yeah, we're still feeling that we're the consequence. We're not actually taking that causality over our lives.
So how does that manifest in my today's life, since I'm not at the end of correction? Where, where in my perception can you point to? I mean, I'm shifting between, you know, sometimes I'm feeling more like the cause, sometimes less than the cause, I don't know, but where would you point to an appearance of me feeling the consequence?
So you said you're switching between those states. So when you're switching between those states, you're switching between those states of feeling the cause. So you're focusing on what you're feeling inside the screen, which is the causality. And then sometimes you're focusing on outside of that screen, which is the consequence. And then end of correction would be when you only feel that you're the cause and never the consequence.
So if we're talking about the four layers of perception, the cause is the two upper, it's the GE, and the consequence is the Achat. With
exactly.
Each one of them with their two subparts.
Yes. Definitely.
So basically, on an ascent, we feel the cause, and on a descent, we feel the consequence?
You could say that as well, yes.
And that's the importance of there's none else beside him, so we return again to the cause?
Yes. There's nothing else besides your internal power.
I have an issue with Zivug Behaka'ah in this example, because usually when there's a rejection of the Ahab, a striking where I would be looking at it as a striking where there's a rejection of the Ahab in order to switch to GE. I sense that striking as an empowerment, as in a focus, and as an alignment, versus here, if I'm getting a striking because I can't still decide to eat or to choose, that striking for me would seem contrary. It would seem like limiting and painful, because I'm still not able to decide and make an effort towards a choice. I'm not sure how to resolve that conflict.
So you're basically talking about the difference between the mating kingdom and the ending kingdom. The mating kingdom is the part that you talked about, the empowerment. That's what the mating kingdom does. It takes reality and clothes it with the causality. It says, I made that happen. That gives an empowerment feeling. It's mating on the light. Right? But the ending kingdom is saying, yeah, this is, that's it. This is all I can handle. Stop. Right? That is, you could say the opposite of the empowering. So you've got these both parts in the screen. So you've got the repelling part, so you've got the initial repelling, which is called in the Rosh in the head, which is that empowerment, like I'm going to be powerful. Then you've got but this is the maximum I can actually handle, and that is called, the repelling of the tabur of the navel, which is like, this is all I can handle, and until here and no more. So you can see on the coupling by striking, you've got both sensations. You've got the sensation of the empowerment and the sensation of I'm only empowered until this degree.
But then at that point where you're only empowered to that degree, that stopping point is your additional power of discernment, the time to sit back and discern and scrutinize what it is, why that's outside of you, what and how to work with it. So that's it's additional strong power, and eventually it'll cascade down further, right? I mean, to the point where you've adjusted it, you've corrected it.
Yeah, and you could say that if your sense of self is in the cause, then you look at the consequences. Yeah, I'll deal with that later. But if your sense of self is in the consequence, in the Bechina Daled, then you're basically in the shell where you feel like, oh, I'm powerless, I can't do anything. That's the whole point.
Maria, when you spoke, I heard something which I want to relate to. You said something about the striking being associated with power, while, I don't know, the sensation I got is that it didn't sit right inside you, something like that, but maybe it's me, probably it's only me. But what I wanted to say was that the depleting is I actually had another example. I was seeing myself sitting in a gym with a weight in my hand, and I'm looking at my hand, and the gravity is pulling it down. And I said to myself, this is the light pleading to that weight to fall down to the ground. That's what the reality would like to happen if I'm out of the picture. And I'm not accepting that light in that form. I'm not willing to let the weight fall down. And I, using the screen probably, reject that option. And instead I tighten my muscle and I lift the weight up. And when I do that, I feel very powerful. Anyway, just a sensation.
Holiness and shells.
Holiness and shells, Baal HaSolam. And just as you find here that it is precisely the rejection and refusal that became the proper vessels to receive his friend's meal, you can imagine that the Or Hoser, reflected light, which rises by the striking of the Masak screen and the rejection of the upper light, becomes the new vessel of reception for the upper light, instead of Bihina Dalet for phase 4, which serves as a vessel of reception prior to the first restriction. However, this was placed only in the Partsufim faces, plural for Partsuf, face, of Kedusha, holiness, of Abia, spiritual worlds, not in the Partsufim faces of the Klipot, shells. And in this world where Bihina Dalet, phase 4, herself is considered the vessel of reception, hence they are separated from the upper light, since the disparity of form in Bihina Dalet, phase 4, separates them. For this reason, the Klipot shells are considered wicked and dead, as they are separated from the life of lives by the will to receive within them. Explanation. And just as you find here that it is precisely the ability to overcome our natural inclination to see selection as restrictive, you can imagine that the reflected light, which rises by the striking of the screen and the rejection of the upper light reality, becomes the new vessel of perception for the upper light reality, instead of the phase 4 perception, which served as our perception prior to crossing the barrier, first restriction. However, this was placed only in the phases, states of adhesion, holiness, in the spiritual world to perception, not in the phases, states of the shells, idol worshipping, and end of correction, where our natural inclination is considered the way we perceive reality. Hence, in a state of idol worshipping, we are separated from power, since the disparity of form in our natural understanding separates us. For this reason, the shells are considered immature and passive, as they are separated from the light of control and expression by their immature perception.
Holiness and shells. Explanation. And just as you find here that it's precisely the ability to overcome a natural inclination to see selection as restrictive, you can imagine that the reflected light, which rises by the striking of the screen and the rejection of the upper light reality, becomes the new vessel of perception for the upper light reality, instead of the phase 4 perception, which served as our perception prior to crossing the barrier, first restriction. Right, so you can see again here the idea of that if we're looking from the perception from the screen, that the screen expands down, then we are the cause of our reality. While if we shift to the vessel, which is where we feel that we're the consequence, that we're receiving reality, we didn't actually make it happen, that is considered not being in your screen and being outside of spirituality and being in corporeality. You're being in the consequence, not in the causality. holiness, and shells. However, this was placed only in the faces, states of adhesion, holiness, in the spiritual worlds of perception, not in the faces, states of the shells, idol worshipping, and end of correction, where our natural inclination is considered the way we perceive reality. Hence, in the state of idol worshipping, we are separated from power, since the disparity of form in our natural understanding separates us. For this reason, the shells are considered immature and passive, and they are separated from the light of control and expression by the immature perception. So what we can see here, we've got all the different parts. So we've got reality that comes through our senses and into our perception, and this is called passive reception. We've got our desires that work on both ways. On one hand, they go into our perception and give us our thoughts and emotions. And on the other hand, they manifest our reality from behind the scenes. And the whole idea of active bestowal is aligning our perception to our desires, understanding ourselves, and going deeper into ourselves, and aligning our perception with our desires. Right, I guess we'll stop here and enter the after party.